The morning was heavy with mist when Adewale and Funk boarded the bus to Murtala Muhammad Airport. Their children, Tund, 14, Saad, 11, and little Femi, 7, stood by the compound gate, clutching the rails like prisoners watching freedom slip away. "We'll send money every month," Funk promised, her eyes glistening. "Make us proud, my children." Her words floated in the air, light but cold, as the bus roared to life. Behind the children, their grandmother, Mama Ronk, sighed deeply, muttering under her breath, "Money can't raise a child, my daughter. Only presents can." That evening, the compound felt hollow. The kerosene lamp flickered weakly as Mama Ronk served yam porridge in silence. Tund pushed his food away, whispering, "They left us, Grandma, just like that." Saad wiped her eyes with the hem of her dress, and Femi clutched her arm tightly. Outside, a stray goat bleated, a lonely sound that echoed their hearts. Mama Ronk looked toward the moon and prayed quietly, "Oloran, watch over these children, for the world is wide and cruel." Weeks turned into months. The first letter came wrapped around crisp dollar bills. It carried the scent of foreign perfume and distant comfort. "Dear Mama, how are the children? Buy them nice things," Funk wrote. Alongside the money came photographs, Funk in a winter coat, Adewale smiling in front of snow. The children passed the photos around, marveling. "See how white the ground is," Saad exclaimed. "It's called snow," Tund replied, a mix of pride and jealousy in his tone. But with each letter came less warmth. The money arrived, yes, but no voice, no visit. Mama Ronk would shake her head as she walked to the market. "They are forgetting their roots," she'd tell her neighbor, Mama Iridi. Meanwhile, Tund started skipping church on Sundays, roaming the neighborhood with older boys. "He's a big man now, his parents are in America," they teased. He smiled proudly, unaware of the shadow growing behind his confidence. By the time Tund turned 16, Lagos had swallowed him whole. The money from America gave him clothes and gadgets but took away humility. He stopped listening to Mama Ronk, returning home late, smelling of beer and cigarette smoke. "Is this what your father taught you?" Mama Ronk cried one night. Tund spat back, "My father isn't here, Grandma. You're not him." The words cut deep. The old woman wept quietly, her frail hands trembling as she whispered, "May the spirits of your ancestors show you sense before it's too late." Saad, now 14, began envying her friends whose parents still came for visiting days. She grew quiet and withdrawn, often sneaking to cyber cafes to chat with strangers online. "Maybe I'll meet someone rich too," she once told her friend Amaka. "Maybe then I'll feel seen." Femi, still young, followed his older siblings' lead, learning from their silence more than their words. The family was unraveling, thread by thread. It was a rainy Tuesday when Mama Ronk passed. She had been coughing for weeks, but pride kept her from asking for help. Saad found her still, lying on the mat, her hands clasped as though in prayer. The neighbors wailed, and word spread through the compound like fire through dry grass. "Who will tell their parents?" someone asked. "They're in America," another replied, shaking her head. "They will send money, but money cannot bury love." When the call finally reached Adewale and Funk, they were shocked but helpless. "We can't leave work now," Adewale said, guilt in his tone. "We'll send $5,000 for the burial." In Nigeria, the children watched as the elders took charge. Tund stood beside the coffin, his jaw tight, unable to cry. "Grandma warned us," Saad whispered. "She said this house would fall apart." And as the rain poured harder, it seemed even the heavens mourned her words coming true. After the funeral, silence returned to the house like an unwelcome ghost. No one cooked anymore. Plates sat dusty in the kitchen. Tund sold the old radio to buy sneakers, claiming he'd repay it when their next allowance came. "You're selling memories," Saad scolded him, but he ignored her. Nights were filled with noise from his friends who came drinking and laughing in the courtyard. Na America Pekin we be, they'd boast, their laughter echoing into the dark. Saad began spending more time outside, avoiding the chaos at home. She started staying with her friend Amaka, who introduced her to men that promised her iPhones and hair extensions. Femi, now 10, wandered aimlessly, sometimes sleeping on neighbors' verandas. The compound elders murmured in pity. When parents go abroad, they leave more than their homes, they leave their children's souls behind, said Baba Shola, shaking his gray head under the moonlight. Excellent, here's the continuation, chapters 6 to 10, in the same realistic modern tone, filled with emotion, dialogue, and vivid African detail. Months after Mama Rong's burial, another envelope arrived from America. It was thick with dollars and short on words. We hope you are doing well. Enclosed is your allowance. Love, Mum and Dad. Saad read it out loud, her voice cracking. Love, she scoffed bitterly. They don't even know Grandma is gone. Tun snatched the envelope from her hand. At least they're sending money, he said. That's all that matters. He stuffed part of it in his pocket before anyone could count. That week, he threw a party. Loud Afrobeats shook the neighborhood as bottles of beer clinked and laughter filled the air. Tund, your parents must be rich, one of his friends shouted over the music. They are, he grinned, though he had never seen their faces in years. Saad locked herself in her room, listening to the noise outside, tears soaking her pillow. In another corner of the house, little Femi covered his ears, whispering to himself, Mama Ronk, please come back. Saad turned 16 with no one to remind her of birthdays or blessings. Her school fees were unpaid, and her teachers had grown tired of promises. Tell your parents to come, her principal said. We can't keep waiting for dollars from across the ocean. That evening, she packed her bag and left the house quietly, heading toward Amaka's flat in Oshodi. I can't stay there anymore, she told Amaka, her voice trembling. I feel like a ghost in my own home. Amaka's place was a one-room apartment filled with perfume bottles, wigs, and secrets. You'll be fine here, Amaka assured her. I know people who can help you make quick money. Within weeks, Saad had changed, long nails, false lashes, and a phone always buzzing with messages from men. She told herself it was survival, not sin. Yet at night, when the streetlights flickered and laughter faded, she'd whisper, Mama, Papa, are you proud of me? Tun's school principal called the house one afternoon. We haven't seen your son in 3 weeks, the woman said sternly. If he doesn't return, we'll strike him off the register. Femi, now 12, answered the call. He's around, he lied softly. When Tund returned that night, smelling of alcohol, Femi confronted him. Brother, your school called. Tund laughed. School. I'm done with that nonsense. Money is all that matters. He patted Femi's head and added, you'll understand one day. The neighbors whispered about the Adewale children. They've gone wild, said one woman at the market. Their parents send dollars but forgot discipline. Even the pastor stopped visiting after Tund insulted him one Sunday. We don't need your pity, Tund had barked. My parents are in America. But inside, he knew he was drifting, and each day without guidance felt like walking deeper into darkness. Thousands of miles away, in a small apartment in Atlanta, Adewale and Funk sat at their dining table, eating in silence. A video call from home buzzed on Funk's phone. It was Femi. His voice was small, his eyes tired. Mummy, Saad left home. Tund no longer goes to school. Funk froze. What do you mean? Where's Mama Ronk? The boy's silence broke her heart. She died last year, he whispered. We buried her in the rain. Adewale dropped his fork, his face pale. You didn't tell us, he asked, trembling. Femi shook his head. Nobody could reach you. Funk began to weep. What have we done, Adewale? She cried. We wanted a better life, but our children are perishing. That night, they sat awake, staring at the ceiling, guilt heavier than the air around them. The dream that once sparkled like gold now tasted like ashes. 2 weeks later, Adewale made a decision. "We're going home," he said firmly, packing his suitcase. Funk hesitated. "What about our jobs?" He shook his head. "What use is money if our children are lost?" They booked the next available flight to Lagos. On the plane, Funk clutched. Staring at the ceiling, guilt heavier than the air around them. The dream that once sparkled like gold now tasted like ashes. 2 weeks later, Adewale made a decision. "We're going home," he said firmly, packing his suitcase. Funk hesitated. "What about our jobs?" He shook his head. "What use is money if our children are lost?" They booked the next available flight to Lagos. On the plane, Funk clutched her Bible, praying quietly. "Lord, let there still be something left to save." When they arrived, the heat hit them like judgment. The compound was overgrown with weeds. Empty bottles and cigarette butts littered the yard. "This can't be our home," Funk whispered. Then Femi ran out, thinner and taller, tears streaming down his face. "Mummy! Daddy!" he cried. Funk hugged him tightly, weeping. But her joy was short-lived. "Where are your siblings?" she asked. Femi looked away, his silence saying more than words ever could. The next morning, Adewale and Funk began searching for their missing children. They visited Sada's school first, only to learn she hadn't attended in over a year. She used to be a bright girl, the principal sighed. But something changed after her grandmother died. From there, they moved through the streets of Oshodi, asking around, showing her photo to traders and Okada riders. "Ah, I think I've seen her before," one woman said. "She stays with that Amaka girl, the one always wearing long wigs and high heels." By evening, they found the flat. Saad was sitting outside, scrolling through her phone when she saw them. Her face went pale. "Mom. Dad," she whispered. Funk rushed forward, tears streaming. "My daughter, what happened to you?" Saad stepped back. "You left us," she said coldly. "You can't just come back and act like parents." Adewale stood speechless, guilt choking him. "We came to make things right," he said softly. Saad shook her head. "It's too late for right." That night, Adewale found Tund at a bar near their street, laughing with older men and boasting loudly. When his father called his name, he turned slowly, surprise flickering in his eyes. "Papa," he said, half drunk. "So, you finally remembered us?" Adewale grabbed his arm. "You're coming home," he ordered. But Tund pulled back. "Home? That house died with Grandma," he spat. "You think money replaces love?" The bar went quiet. The men around them stared as Adewale's voice broke. "Son, I failed you." He dragged Tund outside, ignoring his protests. "You think you're a man, but you're still my child." Adewale shouted, tears in his eyes. Tund laughed bitterly. "Then act like a father." He staggered away into the dark. Adewale fell to his knees on the dusty road, weeping. "Oluwa, give me one more chance," he prayed. "Don't let my son destroy himself." The family's home became a place of confrontation. Saad stayed in her room most of the time, barely speaking. Tund came home once in a while, always angry, always drunk. Only Femi sat with his parents, helping Funk cook or sweeping the compound. "He's the only one who still listens," Funk said one evening. Adewale nodded, his eyes tired. "He grew up too fast," he murmured. "Our absence forced him to be a man before his time." At night, Funk often sat outside, staring at the stars. "Do you think God will forgive us?" she asked softly. Adewale sighed. "Forgiveness comes with change," he said. "But first, we must earn our children's trust again." Their voices echoed into the quiet night, blending with the sound of crickets. For the first time, the house felt both full and painfully empty, crowded with guilt and unspoken words. One afternoon, Saad returned home trembling. Her makeup was smeared, and her eyes were red. "What happened?" Funk asked, rushing to her side. Saad collapsed into her arms, sobbing uncontrollably. "He hit me," she cried. "The man I was staying with, he beat me and threw me out." Adewale clenched his fists in rage. "Who is he?" he demanded. But Funk held him back. "No, Adewale. This is not the time for anger." She turned to her daughter. "You're home now. That's what matters." That night, Saad lay beside her mother, whispering through tears. "Mom, I thought money was everything. I thought, if I dressed like them, talked like them, I'd be someone." Funk stroked her hair gently. "You are someone," she said. "But you lost yourself because we weren't here to guide you." Saad closed her eyes and whispered, "Don't leave again." And in that quiet moment, something inside Funk broke, and began to heal. While Saad was rediscovering home, Tun's path darkened. One night, police sirens blared near the market. Adewale and Funk ran outside to see a small crowd forming. A policeman shouted, "We caught them trying to rob a shop." And there, under the harsh light, stood Tund, his face swollen, his hands cuffed. "No," Funk gasped, falling to her knees. "That's my son." Adewale tried to reach him, but the officers held him back. "He'll be taken to the station," they said. "You can see him tomorrow." At the police cell the next day, Tund sat quietly, his pride gone. When Adewale appeared, he looked away in shame. "Papa," he muttered, "I didn't mean for it to go this far." Adewale's voice trembled. "I warned you, son. I warned you before I even left this country." Tears filled Tund's eyes. "You left me when I needed you most," he whispered. "Now I'm lost." Adewale pressed his hand against the cell bars, his voice breaking. "Then let me help you find your way back." Would you like me to continue with chapters 16 to 20 next, where Tund's imprisonment shakes the family, the community responds, and the parents begin rebuilding through humility and faith? Once confirmed, I'll continue seamlessly in this emotional, vivid, and deeply realistic. Perfect. Here's the continuation, chapters 16 to 20, where pain begins to birth transformation, and the family's road to redemption unfolds in the rich, emotional, modern African tone you requested. The next morning, Adewale and Funk arrived at the police station carrying food and clean clothes. The officer on duty looked at them sternly. "You people from abroad think money can fix everything," he said. "But this one," he nodded toward the cell, "needs discipline, not dollars." Funk lowered her eyes. "We're not here to buy him out," she said quietly. "We're here to stand by him." When Tund emerged, his head was shaved, his once proud shoulders hunched. "Mummy," he whispered, his voice trembling. She hugged him tightly through the bars, tears soaking her wrapper. "I forgive you, my son," she said. "But you must forgive yourself too." Adewale spoke with the officer and agreed to pay for damages so Tund could be released on probation. As they left the station, Tund looked at the sky for the first time in months, the sun bright and blinding. "It feels strange," he said. "To be free again." His father placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then don't waste it this time." When they returned home, the compound was alive with whispers. "So he's back," one woman muttered. "Jailbird." Another added, "His parents have come crawling from America now that things are bad." Adewale heard every word but kept walking, his dignity quiet and firm. That evening, he gathered his children and said, "Let people talk. What matters is who we become next." Tund avoided everyone's eyes, while Saad sat silently beside him. "We've already lost too much," she said softly. "Let's not lose each other too." Later that night, Tun found Sod washing dishes. "You should hate me," he said. "For everything I did." She shook her head. "We all lost our way, brother. But at least now we know where home is." For the first time in years, they laughed, softly, like the beginning of forgiveness. From her window, Funk watched them and whispered, "Thank you, Lord. The house is breathing again." Femi had grown into a quiet strength, wiser than his age. He watched his parents and siblings heal with the calm of someone who had carried the family's pain in silence. One morning, he approached his father while sweeping the compound. "Papa," he said, "maybe we can help others too." Adewale frowned. "What do you mean?" Femi smiled. "There are other children in this street whose parents are abroad. They're becoming like we were. Maybe if we tell our story, it can save them." Adewale was silent for a moment, then nodded slowly. "You're right, my son. Maybe our scars can teach others." That week, they began visiting local schools and churches, sharing their story of neglect and reunion. People listened, some wept, some nodded in understanding. For the first time, Adewale and Funk felt their pain had a purpose. "We left to find a better life," Funk said to a crowd one Sunday, "but we forgot that love is life's truest wealth." One afternoon, Pastor Iridi, an old family friend, came to visit. He sat in the living room, Bible on his lap. "I heard what happened," he said softly. "But I also heard what you're doing now. God restores those who humble themselves." He turned to Tund. "Young man, what are your plans?" Tund looked down. "I want to go back to school," he said. "Maybe study mechanics or engineering." The pastor nodded approvingly. Redemption begins with purpose. After he left, Adewale felt something lift from his chest. That evening, he gathered his family for prayer, their first in many years. "Father," he said, his voice breaking, "thank you for bringing us home, not just to Nigeria, but to each other." As they prayed, the old house, once cold and silent, seemed to hum with warmth. Even the wind through the windows sounded like forgiveness. Months passed, and life slowly regained shape. Tund began apprenticing at a local mechanic workshop, determined to prove himself. He came home every evening, his clothes greasy but his heart clean. "It feels good to work with my hands," he said one night, smiling genuinely for the first time in years. Saad enrolled in a tailoring school nearby, learning to sew bright Ankara dresses. "I want to start a fashion brand," she told her mother proudly. "One that tells African stories through fabric." Funk started attending women's fellowship meetings, helping other mothers stay connected with their children abroad. Adewale, meanwhile, began writing a memoir titled The Price of Distance. Each chapter felt like healing poured into paper. One evening, he looked around the dinner table, his children laughing, sharing food, praying together, and he whispered, "We were lost, but now we're found." Funk smiled and replied, "And this time, we're not leaving again." One morning, Funk walked through the bustling Ajij market to buy foodstuffs. She was surprised when Mama Iridi, the same woman who once gossiped about her children, called out, "Ah, Sister Funk. You look different these days. Peace fits you." Funk smiled humbly. "It's God's doing," she said. Mama Iridi nodded thoughtfully. "You know, people make mistakes. What matters is how they rise again. Your story is teaching many." As Funk paid for vegetables, a small boy selling sachet water approached and greeted politely. "Good afternoon, Ma." His voice reminded her of Femi. She handed him extra naira notes and said softly, "Never stop being good, my son." The boy's smile stayed with her the whole way home. That evening, she told Adewale, "Even in our fall, we can still lift others." Adewale smiled. "Yes," he said, "because grace multiplies when it's shared." Months later, Saad began showcasing her designs at a local youth fair. Bright Ankara dresses with bold, traditional patterns lined her stall. Your work tells stories, a woman told her. It feels like home stitched into fabric. Sada's heart swelled with pride. That evening, as she packed up, she saw a group of girls whispering about traveling abroad for greener pastures. She smiled sadly and said to them, I once thought the same. But home can be fertile too, if we water it with effort. When she returned home, she showed her parents her first profit. I sold everything, she said proudly. Funk hugged her tight. You've turned pain into beauty. Saad nodded. Maybe this is what Grandma meant when she said suffering can teach. That night, Saad dreamt of Mama Ronk smiling beneath the moonlight, whispering, You've remembered your roots, my child. She woke up with tears in her eyes and peace in her heart. Tun's hands had become rough and strong from working at the mechanic workshop. His boss, Baba Chaik, saw the change in him. You have potential, boy, he said one afternoon. You learn fast. One day, this place could be yours. Tun smiled modestly. Thank you, sir. I just want to make my parents proud again. When he got home that evening, he surprised Adewale by handing him his first week's pay. I want to start contributing, he said quietly. Adewale's eyes welled up with tears. Tun, he said, his voice trembling, you've made me proud already. Later that night, they sat outside together under the stars. Papa, Tun began, I used to blame you for everything. But now I see, I was also blind. Adewale smiled faintly. We both were. But the beauty of life is that it gives us time to see clearly again. And under that quiet Lagos night, the bond between father and son was finally restored. The family's transformation began inspiring others in their street. Neighbors who once gossiped now came for advice. How did you fix what was broken? One mother asked. Funk smiled. We started by talking, not shouting. Listening, not judging. The local pastor invited Adewale to speak during youth fellowship. Tell them your story, he said. They need to hear that success abroad means nothing if love is lost at home. Adewale stood before the young crowd and said, When I chased money overseas, I thought I was building a future. But I was losing my children one day at a time. Don't make that mistake. Be present, even if you have little. The hall was silent. Some parents wept openly. When the event ended, Femi whispered to his father, You've turned your pain into purpose. Adewale smiled proudly. And you, my son, turned silence into wisdom. One quiet evening, Funk gathered the family around the dining table. Let's write letters, she said. Not to anyone, but to the life we left behind. They each took a sheet of paper. Adewale wrote to his younger self, confessing the mistakes he made chasing a dream too far. Funk wrote to the woman she became, lonely, hard-working, but wiser now. Saad wrote to Grandma, thanking her for love and warning. Tund wrote to God, promising to live differently. Femi, the youngest, wrote only one sentence, Family is when hearts stay together, not when people live together. When he read it aloud, silence filled the room. Adewale took his son's hand and whispered, That sentence carries the weight of a lifetime. They placed the letters in a small wooden box and buried it in the garden behind the house. A time capsule, Saad said. So we'll never forget what distance cost us. After years away from their ancestral home, Adewale decided it was time to visit the village where Mama Ronk was buried. The family traveled down the dusty road, the scent of rain-soaked earth welcoming them back. When they arrived, the villagers gathered, surprised but joyful. Ah, the America people have returned, someone shouted. Welcome home. Funk knelt beside Mama Ronk's grave, tears spilling onto the red soil. Mama, you were right, she whispered. Money can't raise a child. Only love can. Tund and Saad stood silently, holding Femi's hands. She'd be proud of us now, Saad said softly. Tund nodded. We lost her, but her words never left. That evening, under the wide sky filled with stars, the family sat by a small fire, eating roasted corn and listening to the night insects. It felt like the world had paused, just to let them remember what peace truly was. Back in Lagos, Adewale launched a small community initiative called the Mama Ronk Foundation, named after his late mother. Its purpose was to support children of parents living abroad, offering counseling, mentorship, and school scholarships. No child should feel abandoned because their parents chase greener pastures, he said during the launch ceremony. The event drew reporters, teachers, and even local leaders. "You've turned your pain into a blessing," one official remarked. Saad designed the foundation's logo, a pair of hands holding a heart surrounded by roots. "It represents home," she explained. Tun volunteered as a mentor for boys in the neighborhood. "I know what it means to feel lost," he told them. "But no matter how far you fall, there's always a way back." The applause that followed wasn't just for them, it was for redemption made visible. 2 years later, the family's compound buzzed with excitement. Saad was getting married to a young architect named Kunal, a kind man who admired her resilience. "I fell in love with your strength," he told her, smiling. As the drummers beat and women danced in vibrant Ankara wrappers, Funk couldn't stop crying. "She's become everything I prayed for," she whispered to Adewale. "And more." Adewale smiled. "She learned from our pain and turned it into purpose." During the ceremony, Saad gave a brief speech. "I dedicate this day to my late grandmother," she said, her voice firm but emotional. "She taught me that roots matter more than riches." The crowd clapped, and somewhere in the breeze, it felt as though Mama Ronk's spirit was smiling, proud of the tree her love had planted. Tund opened his own mechanic workshop, naming it Faith Works Garage. On the first day, he hung a small sign on the wall that read, "Discipline is the true currency." Business grew quickly because people trusted his honesty and skill. One afternoon, Adewale visited, watching his son confidently directing his apprentices. "You've come far," he said proudly. Tund wiped his hands and replied, "You showed me how to turn failure into foundation." Later that day, a local TV crew came to interview him for a feature on successful youth entrepreneurs. "What's your secret?" the reporter asked. Tund smiled. "My secret? Pain taught me, but love saved me." His story aired that weekend, inspiring many across Lagos. When his family watched it together, Funk reached out and held Adewale's hand. "Our son is a man now," she said softly. "And this time, we were here to see it." Years passed, and the Adewale family became a symbol of hope in their community. The compound that once echoed with pain now rang with children's laughter, Sada's twin daughters chasing Femi's little boy across the yard. Adewale sat beneath the mango tree, watching the sunset. "Do you remember when we thought all was lost?" he asked Funk. She smiled, her eyes warm. "Yes," she said. "But God never wastes a broken story." That evening, as the family gathered for dinner, they prayed together, just as Mama Ronk had once done. Femi read from the Bible, "Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it." When he finished, the wind blew softly through the windows, carrying the scent of rain and memories. Adewale looked around the table, his family whole again, and whispered, "We went searching for gold across the ocean, but we found it right here at home."